Sometimes the broken find each other in the most unexpected ways. Jack Warner had lost everything: his marriage, his family, his sense of purpose, when he retreated to a remote mountain cabin just to survive another day. One cold evening, a dying donkey collapsed at his door, bleeding and barely alive. Jack brought her inside, thinking he'd simply let her pass in peace. But she kept looking toward the woods, braying softly with desperate urgency. Jack followed her gaze and found a trail leading into the darkness. Hidden beneath the brush was a newborn foal, alone and shivering. The mother had used her last strength to find someone who would protect her baby. Could this final act of love save them both? Before we continue, tell us where you are tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jack Warner stood at the window of his mountain cabin, watching the last light fade behind the ridge. 54 years old, and he felt ancient, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, the kind that settled into your bones and made a home there. 3 months ago, he'd driven up this mountain with nothing but a duffel bag and the keys to a cabin he'd inherited from his uncle. 3 months of silence, of days bleeding into each other without purpose or direction. 3 months of running from a life that had crumbled so completely he couldn't recognize the pieces anymore. The divorce papers still sat on the kitchen table, right where he'd left them after signing. Christine had filed 6 months back, though if Jack was honest with himself, their marriage had ended long before that. 20 years together, and somehow they'd become strangers sharing a house. The kids had grown up and moved out, and without them as buffers, Jack and Christine had nothing left to say to each other. Preston was 28 now, teaching high school English in Portland. Claire had just turned 25, working as a physical therapist in Denver. Both good kids who'd built good lives. Jack should have been proud. He was proud, somewhere beneath the numbness. But pride didn't fill the silence of an empty house, didn't answer the question of what a man was supposed to do when his children didn't need him anymore, and his wife didn't want him. So he'd packed a bag and driven north into Montana, to this cabin that sat at the end of a dirt road, 12 miles from the nearest town. The place was small. 2 rooms, a wood stove, a porch that overlooked a valley so vast it made a man feel appropriately insignificant. Uncle Frank had used it for hunting trips, but Jack wasn't here to hunt. He was here to disappear. The cabin had become his entire world. Mornings, he'd make coffee and sit on the porch until the cold drove him inside. Afternoons, he worked with his hands, splitting wood, fixing the sagging porch rail, carving small figures from scraps of pine. He'd been an architect once, had run his own firm in Seattle for 15 years. Now he whittled birds and tried not to think about blueprints gathering dust in an office he'd sold. Evenings were the hardest. That stretch of time between sunset and sleep, when the silence pressed in and his thoughts turned circles he couldn't escape. The mistakes he'd made, the words he couldn't take back, the slow erosion of everything he'd built. He'd spoken to Preston exactly twice since coming to the cabin. Short, stilted conversations, where his son asked if he was okay, and Jack lied. Claire called more often, her voice bright with forced cheer, asking when he'd come back to civilization. He didn't have an answer for her, didn't know if he was coming back at all. The town of Pinehaven sat 30 miles down the mountain, a cluster of buildings barely large enough to warrant a post office. Jack had driven down once a week at first, stocking up on supplies, exchanging brief nods with the locals who respected a man's privacy. He'd met Dr. Iris Whitmore on his second trip, the town's only veterinarian, a woman in her early 60s with steel-grey hair and eyes that saw more than you wanted them to. She'd been loading feed bags into her truck at the general store when Jack had parked beside her. They'd exchanged pleasantries, the kind of careful small talk that happened between strangers in small towns. She'd given him her card. "In case you come across any injured wildlife," she'd said. "Happens more than you'd think up here." Jack had taken the card, tucked it in his wallet, and promptly forgotten about it. Now he barely went to town at all. His supplies were running low, canned goods mostly gone, firewood stack diminishing. He should drive down, restock before winter truly set in. The temperatures had been dropping steadily, frost on the ground most mornings now. Snow would come soon, and once it did, that dirt road would become impassable for weeks at a time. But Jack couldn't muster the energy to care. Some days he forgot to eat until evening, would realize he'd gone the whole day on nothing but coffee. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loose, but it seemed like too much effort to do anything about it. The carved bird he'd been working on sat on the kitchen table beside the divorce papers. A small thing, wings spread in flight, details emerging slowly from the wood. He'd started it 2 weeks ago, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. It was almost finished now, just needed the final smoothing, the last touches that would bring it to life. Jack picked it up, ran his thumb over the rough spots. His hands remembered this, even if the rest of him had forgotten how to function. Architecture and woodworking weren't so different. Both required patience, vision, the ability to see what something could become. He set the bird down and moved to the stove, added another log to the fire. The cabin was drafty, heat escaping through gaps in the walls he hadn't bothered to seal. Outside, the wind was picking up, carrying the promise of the season's first real cold snap. That's when he heard it. A sound like something collapsing, heavy and final, coming from just beyond his front door. Jack froze, listening. Nothing. Then another sound, labored breathing, a low moan that might have been animal or might have been something else. He grabbed the flashlight from the hook by the door and stepped onto the porch. The beam cut through the darkness, swept across the clearing, and stopped. A donkey lay crumpled at the base of his porch steps, sides heaving, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood matted the fur on her foreleg, dark and wet in the flashlight's beam. Her eyes rolled white with pain and exhaustion. Jack stood there, frozen. He hadn't seen another living creature in weeks. Now this, a dying animal on his doorstep, looking up at him with eyes that held something like pleading. His first thought was to go back inside. Call someone. Maybe. Dr. Whitmore, if he could get a signal on his phone. Let someone who knew what they were doing handle this. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. Couldn't. Because those eyes were asking him for something he hadn't been asked for in so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed. Jack descended the steps slowly, approaching the donkey like you would any frightened, wounded thing. She didn't try to move, didn't have the strength left for fear. Up close, he could see how thin she was, ribs showing through dull fur, the wound on her leg deep and infected. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I've got you." He had no idea if that was true, had no idea what he was supposed to do with a dying donkey, but he said it anyway, and meant it, and that was something. Jack worked by lamplight, his hands moving with a gentleness that surprised him. The donkey. He couldn't keep thinking of her as the donkey. She needed a name. Lay on a pile of blankets he'd pulled from the bedroom closet. Her breathing had steadied somewhat, though each inhale still carried a tremor of pain. He'd managed to half carry, half drag her inside, an effort that left him shaking and breathless. She couldn't have weighed much, thin as she was, but dead weight was dead weight, and Jack hadn't exactly been taking care of himself lately. Now he knelt beside her with the first aid kit he'd found under the sink, its contents meager and probably expired. Antiseptic, gauze, tape. Nothing close to what a large animal would need, but it was what he had. The wound on her leg was worse up close, a deep gash that ran from just above her hoof almost to her knee, edges ragged and inflamed. Something had torn into her, barbed wire maybe, or a sharp branch during a fall. The infection had spread, red lines radiating outward from the wound like rivers on a map. Jack cleaned it as best he could, working slowly, murmuring apologies when she flinched. The antiseptic had to burn, but she bore it with a stoicism that made his chest tight. When he wrapped the gauze around her leg, she let out a long breath and closed her eyes. He sat back on his heels, studying her. The halter around her neck was worn leather, cracked and faded. A metal tag hung from it, the engraving barely visible. Jack tilted it toward the light. "Dolly," he read aloud. The name felt right somehow, solid and unpretentious. He touched her shoulder gently. "Is that you? Dolly?" Her ear twitched at the sound. Jack noticed something else then. The halter held more than just the name tag. Tucked against the leather, secured with what looked like a twist of wire, was a small plastic bag. He worked it free carefully, held it up to the lamp. Inside was a photograph. Colors faded, but image still clear. A young girl, maybe 9 years old, arms wrapped around Dolly's neck. Both of them were smiling, the girl's face bright with uncomplicated joy, Dolly's expression as close to contentment as a donkey could manage. Jack turned the photo over, written in careful child's handwriting. "Her name is Dolly. Please keep her safe. Autumn, age 9. Something in Jack's chest cracked open. This animal had belonged to someone once, had been loved by a child who'd cared enough to write a note, to ask whoever found Dolly to keep her safe. He looked at Dolly with new eyes. How long had she been wandering? How many hands had she passed through? How many miles had she traveled to end up here, dying on a stranger's doorstep? "Where did you come from, girl?" he asked softly. Dolly's eyes opened, fixed on him with an intensity that caught him off guard. Then her gaze shifted, moving past him toward the far wall, toward the window that looked out into the woods. She made a sound, not quite a bray, more like a low, urgent vocalization. Her body tensed, tried to rise, fell back with a grunt of pain. "Easy," Jack said. "You can't get up. Not yet." But Dolly kept looking toward the window, kept making that sound. A call, a plea. Jack followed her gaze. Nothing but darkness beyond the glass, the woods a wall of shadow. He turned back to her, touched her neck. "There's nothing out there, just trees." Dolly brayed again, louder this time, the sound scraping raw against the cabin's silence. She struggled, hooves scrabbling against the blankets, the effort clearly costing her. "Stop," Jack said. "You're going to hurt yourself worse." But she wouldn't stop, kept looking toward the window, kept calling into the darkness with a desperation that raised the hair on Jack's arms. He stood, moved to the window, pressed his face against the glass. The woods were thick here, pine and spruce growing so close their branches tangled together. In daylight you could see maybe 20 feet before the forest swallowed everything. At night it might as well be a void. Behind him, Dolly's cries grew more insistent. Jack grabbed his flashlight and coat. "All right," he said. "All right, I'll look." Outside, the cold hit him like a fist, his breath clouded, white in the beam of the flashlight. He swept it across the tree line, looking for... What? He had no idea what he was looking for. Then he saw it. A break in the undergrowth, barely visible. Not quite a trail, more like a deer path, narrow and overgrown. It led into the woods in the direction Dolly had been staring. Jack hesitated. Going into the forest at night was foolish, the kind of thing that got people lost or worse. But Dolly's cries echoed from the cabin behind him, and something in those sounds pulled at him with hooks he couldn't name. He started down the path. The woods closed around him immediately, the darkness so complete his flashlight seemed to barely penetrate it. Branches caught at his coat, roots tried to trip him. He moved slowly, following the faint suggestion of a trail, no idea what he was walking toward. 20 yards in, he almost turned back. This was insane. He was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, following a dying donkey's direction into the wilderness in the middle of the night. Then his light caught something ahead, a shape that didn't belong. Too regular, too deliberate. Jack pushed forward, branches scraping his face, until he stood before what could only be called a shelter. Someone had piled thick brush against a fallen log, creating a small cave-like space beneath. Fresh pine boughs formed a roof, still green and fragrant. Jack crouched, shined his light inside. A foal lay curled in the shelter, so small it couldn't have been more than a day old. Its coat was damp, legs folded beneath it, sides rising and falling with shallow breaths. When the light hit it, the foal raised its head weakly, let out a thin, plaintive cry. Jack's hand went to his mouth. Oh God. Understanding crashed over him. Dolly hadn't been wandering aimlessly. She'd been traveling with purpose, even as she died. She'd hidden her baby, kept it safe, then gone looking for help, had somehow found Jack's cabin, had chosen his door to collapse against. She'd used the last of her strength to bring someone back to her foal, to ensure her baby wouldn't die alone in the woods. Jack reached into the shelter with shaking hands, gathered the foal carefully. It was so light, felt impossibly fragile. Its eyes were dark and huge, reflecting his flashlight like mirrors. "I've got you," Jack whispered. "I've got you now." He carried the foal back through the woods, following his own disturbed trail, the small animal trembling against his chest. When he pushed through the cabin door, Dolly raised her head, saw what he carried, and made a sound Jack would remember for the rest of his life, relief and gratitude and exhaustion all tangled together. Jack laid the foal beside its mother. Dolly immediately began nuzzling it, checking it over with the thoroughness of a parent who'd been separated from their child. The foal burrowed against her, seeking warmth, seeking milk. Jack sank into a chair, watched them together. Mother and baby reunited. Dolly had done it, had saved her foal even as she died, had trusted a broken man to finish what she'd started. For the first time in months, Jack felt something crack through the numbness that had consumed him. Not quite hope, he wasn't ready for that yet, but something adjacent to it. Something that felt like purpose. He pulled out his phone, searched with frustratingly slow internet for how to care for a newborn foal. The results loaded in painful increments, but eventually he had enough information to know. This baby needed colostrum, needed warmth, needed specialized care he had no idea how to provide. His thumb hovered over Dr. Whitmore's number in his contacts. Calling her meant admitting he was in over his head, meant asking for help, something Jack had spent 3 months avoiding. But as he watched the foal try unsuccessfully to nurse from its dying mother, watched Dolly's eyes cloud with worry, Jack knew he had no choice. He made the call. The phone rang 4 times before Dr. Whitmore answered, her voice alert despite the late hour. "This is Iris." "Dr. Whitmore, it's Jack Warner. We met in town a few weeks back." He paused, suddenly unsure how to explain. "I need help." Those 3 words felt heavier than they should have. Jack couldn't remember the last time he'd said them out loud. What's happened? No judgment in her voice, just professional focus. There's a donkey. She showed up at my cabin tonight, injured and sick, and she has a foal, newborn. I don't know what I'm doing. Where are you exactly? Jack gave her directions, heard her moving on the other end of the line, gathering supplies, probably. I can be there in 40 minutes, she said. Keep them warm. Don't let the foal nurse if the mother's been sick. We don't know what she might pass on. Can you do that? I think so. Good. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Jack lowered the phone, looked at Dolly and her baby. 40 minutes. He could manage 40 minutes. Except the foal was already trying to nurse again, instinct driving it toward its mother. Jack gently pulled it away, earned a weak protest from Dolly. I know, he told her. I know you want to feed your baby. We will. Just not yet. He built up the fire until the cabin was almost too warm, then fashioned a makeshift pen, using chairs and rope to keep the foal from wandering. The little one wobbled on stick-thin legs, folded down beside Dolly with a sigh. Jack sat on the floor across from them, back against the wall. The carved bird still sat on the table behind him, the divorce papers spread around it like fallen leaves. 24 hours ago, those papers had been the most important thing in his world. Now they seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. He studied Dolly in the lamplight. Her breathing had that wet, labored quality that meant fluid in the lungs. The leg wound was just one problem among many. She was starved, exhausted, probably had pneumonia or worse. Even if Dr. Whitmore could treat the infection, Dolly's body had been pushed far beyond its limits. She was dying. Jack knew it, could see it in the way she held herself, in the distant look that came and went in her eyes. She'd known it too when she'd made that shelter for her foal, when she'd set out to find help. You're something else, Jack said quietly. You know that? Dolly's ear swiveled toward his voice. I mean it. What you did, traveling God knows how far while you were dying, hiding your baby, then finding someone to help. He shook his head. That takes courage I'm not sure I have any more. The words surprised him. He hadn't meant to say them, hadn't meant to open that door. But sitting here in the warm cabin with two animals who needed him, the walls he'd built around himself felt thinner than usual. I've got 2 kids, he continued, the words coming easier now. Preston and Claire, good kids. I should have been a better father to them. Was too busy building a business, making money, providing, like that was all that mattered. By the time I realized what I'd missed, they were grown and gone. Dolly watched him with dark, knowing eyes. My wife left me. Ex-wife now, I guess. Can't even blame her. I checked out of our marriage years ago, just didn't have the honesty to admit it. So she did it for me. Jack rubbed his face. Came up here to figure out what to do next. Except I haven't been figuring anything out. Just been hiding. The foal stirred, made a small sound. Dolly nuzzled it gently. You didn't hide, though, Jack said. Even dying, you kept going. Kept fighting for your baby. His voice cracked slightly. That's what a parent's supposed to do, isn't it? Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Dolly's labored breathing. Jack closed his eyes, let exhaustion wash over him. When had he last slept? Really slept, not just dozed fitfully in a chair. A sound pulled him back. Tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the cabin windows. Dr. Whitmore knocked once, then entered without waiting, a large veterinary bag slung over her shoulder. She was dressed in practical work clothes, grey hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her gaze went immediately to the animals. Tell me everything, she said, kneeling beside Dolly. Jack explained while she examined them, finding Dolly at his door, the wound, the foal hidden in the woods. Dr. Whitmore worked as he talked, her hands gentle but efficient, checking Dolly's vitals, examining the foal with practiced care. When Jack finished, she sat back on her heels. The mother's got pneumonia, severe dehydration, and that leg wound is badly infected. She's been running on nothing but will for at least a week, maybe more. Can you save her? Dr. Whitmore met his eyes. I can make her comfortable, keep her out of pain. But Jack, this animal's been through more than most could survive. Her body's shutting down. Jack nodded. He'd known, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. How long? Days. Maybe less. She turned to the foal. This little one, though, she's got a fighting chance if we act fast. She needs colostrum, the antibodies from her mother's first milk. But given Dolly's condition, I don't want to risk it. I've got substitute formula in the truck. She stood, headed for the door. I'll show you how to feed her. You'll need to do it every 2 to 3 hours for the first week. Every 2 hours? Jack's exhaustion seemed to double at the thought. Dr. Whitmore paused at the door, looked back at him. You called me for help. This is what help looks like. Work, commitment, showing up even when you're tired. Can you do that? Jack looked at the foal, then at Dolly, watching him with those patient, trusting eyes. He thought about running, about calling someone else to take over, about returning to his isolation. Yes, he said, I can do that. Good. Dr. Whitmore almost smiled. Let's get started then. The next hour passed in a blur of instruction. Dr. Whitmore showed him how to mix the formula, how to get the foal to accept the bottle, how to support her while she drank. The little one was weak but hungry, latching onto the bottle with desperate enthusiasm once she understood what it was. She's got spirit, Dr. Whitmore observed. That'll serve her well. She gave Dolly antibiotics for the infection, pain medication, fluids through an IV line she set up with practiced efficiency. Dolly accepted it all with weary patience. I'll check back tomorrow, Dr. Whitmore said as she packed her bag. Call if anything changes before then. And Jack? Get some sleep. You look like hell. Thanks, he said dryly. She paused at the door. I mean it about the sleep. These animals need you functional, not running on fumes. After she left, Jack sat with the bottle and the foal, coaxing her through the rest of her feeding. When she finally had her fill, she curled against Dolly with a satisfied sigh. Jack set an alarm on his phone for 2 hours, lay down on the floor beside them. Just for a moment, he told himself, just to rest his eyes. He was asleep before the thought finished forming. The alarm shattered Jack's sleep at 2 in the morning. He woke disoriented, neck stiff from the hard floor, the cabin dark except for the dying embers in the stove. For a moment, he couldn't remember why he was sleeping on the floor, why his body ached like he'd been beaten. Then the foal stirred beside him, and everything came rushing back. Jack pushed himself upright, joints protesting. The foal was awake, making small, hungry sounds. Dolly lay still, chest rising and falling in shallow rhythms. All right, Jack muttered, stumbling toward the kitchen. All right, I'm coming. Mixing the formula in the dark was an adventure. He knocked over the measuring cup twice, had to refill the bottle when he realized he'd gotten the proportions wrong. His hands shook with exhaustion as he heated water on the stove, tested the temperature against his wrist the way Dr. Whitmore had shown. Him. The foal took the bottle eagerly this time, having figured out the mechanics. Jack sat on the floor and watched her drink. Something oddly meditative about the quiet cabin, the warm animal against his leg, the simple act of feeding. When she finished, He cleaned the bottle and set another alarm. 4 in the morning, then 6, then 8. The night stretched ahead of him in 2-hour increments, but somehow that made it manageable. He didn't have to think about tomorrow or next week, just the next feeding. The pattern repeated 3 more times before dawn broke. By the time grey light filtered through the windows, Jack felt hollowed out, running on something beyond exhaustion. But the foal had taken every feeding, was already moving with more strength, and that felt like victory. Dolly's condition hadn't changed. She lay quiet, eyes tracking Jack's movements when he was near. He'd given her water with a syringe, the way Dr. Whitmore instructed, pleased when she swallowed without difficulty. "You did good," he told her, running a hand down her neck. "Your baby's strong. She's going to make it." Something in Dolly's eyes shifted. Relief, maybe, or permission to finally rest. Jack made coffee as the sun climbed higher, stood at the window and watched light spread across the valley. 3 days ago he'd stood in this same spot, staring at nothing, counting hours until he could justify going back to sleep. Now he was counting hours between feedings, planning his day around a newborn animal's needs. The absurdity of it struck him. He'd come here to escape responsibility, and somehow he'd ended up with more than he'd had in months. His phone buzzed. Claire's name lit up the screen. Jack almost didn't answer. Talking to his daughter required energy he wasn't sure he had, but something made him swipe to accept. "Hey, sweetheart." "Dad!" Claire's voice carried that forced brightness that meant she was worried. "I was starting to think you'd lost your phone. You haven't returned my calls." "Sorry. Been busy." "Busy? In the middle of nowhere?" A pause. "Are you okay?" Jack looked at the foal, now asleep beside Dolly. "Actually, yes. I think I might be." "Really?" Skepticism colored her tone. "Because you sound exhausted." "I am exhausted. But it's different than before." He sat at the table, wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "I found some animals that needed help. A donkey and her baby." "You found animals?" "They found me, more accurately. The mother's dying, but the foal's going to survive. I've been up all night feeding her." Silence on the other end. Then, "Dad, are you sure you're okay?" "Because this sounds, I know how it sounds. But Claire, I'm feeding a baby animal every 2 hours. Do you know when the last time was that I had something depending on me like that?" "We depended on you," Claire said quietly. The words landed like stones in Jack's chest. "I know, and I wasn't there the way I should have been. Too busy working, providing, thinking that was enough." "Dad, let me finish. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying I forgot what it felt like to be actually needed. Not for money or career advice, but for real, immediate care. These animals need me to show up every 2 hours or they die. There's something clarifying about that." Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "What are you going to do with them?" "The mother probably won't last the week. The foal, I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead. That's a first." Jack smiled despite himself. "Yeah, well, I'm learning to take things as they come." They talked for a few more minutes, the conversation easier than it had been in months. Claire told him about work, about a guy she'd been seeing. Jack listened, really listened, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak or check out entirely. "I'm glad you called," he said, when they were winding down. "I'm glad you answered." A pause. "Dad, I'm proud of you for helping those animals." After they hung up, Jack sat staring at his phone. When had Claire last said she was proud of him? He couldn't remember. The realization hurt more than it should have. The foal woke, demanding another feeding. Jack prepared the bottle, his movements more confident now, muscle memory already forming. As she drank, he studied her. The delicate legs, the oversized ears, the soft, dark eyes that watched him with complete trust. "You need a name," he said. "Can't keep calling you the foal forever." He thought about it while she finished eating. Nothing felt right until he remembered the feeling that had cracked through his numbness last night, that sense of something possible, something worth staying for. "Hope," he said. "That's your name. Hope." The foal blinked at him, unconcerned with the weight of symbolism he'd just saddled her with. Jack spent the afternoon building. He'd noticed Dolly struggling with the hard floor, so he gathered every blanket and cushion in the cabin, created a proper bed for her. Then he turned his attention to Hope, using scrap lumber from the shed to construct a small enclosure, something to keep her safe and contained while still letting her see her mother. His hands remembered the work, the satisfaction of creation. Architecture and carpentry weren't so different. Both required vision, planning, the ability to see what something could become. For months, he'd been too numb to create anything. Now he found himself sketching improvements on scraps of paper, planning. Dr. Whitmore arrived as the sun was setting, examined both animals with her efficient thoroughness. "The foal's thriving," she said. "You're doing well with her. Thanks to your instructions." She moved to Dolly, listened to her breathing, checked the IV line. Her expression grew somber. "She's declining, faster than I'd hoped." Jack had known this was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. "How long?" 2 days, maybe 3. I'm sorry." After Dr. Whitmore left, Jack sat between Dolly and Hope, the cabin quiet around them. He pulled out the photograph he'd found in Dolly's halter, studied the young girl's face. "I'm going to find her," he told Dolly. "This autumn. I'm going to tell her what you did, how brave you were, how you saved your baby even when you were dying. She needs to know that." Dolly's ear flicked toward his voice. "And I'm going to take care of Hope. Give her a good life. I promise you that." He meant it. Somewhere in the last 24 hours, these animals had stopped being a temporary responsibility and become something more, a purpose, a reason to stay. Jack set his alarm for the next feeding, lay down beside them. This time, when sleep came, it was deeper, more restful. For the first time in months, he slept without dreaming of all he'd lost. Morning came with frost on the windows, and Hope demanding breakfast with increasingly insistent bleats. Jack dragged himself from sleep, surprised to find he'd managed 4 straight hours. Hope had slept through 1 feeding cycle. Dr. Whitmore had mentioned that would start happening as the foal gained strength. Progress. The word felt foreign, but good. He was heating water for Hope's bottle when he noticed the book on the counter, a collection of short stories he'd brought from Seattle, something Christine had given him years ago. He couldn't even remember packing it, must have grabbed it automatically when he'd fled his old life. Jack picked it up, meaning to move it aside, and a folded piece of paper slipped from between the pages. He caught it before it hit the floor, recognized Christine's handwriting immediately. His hands went still. This was a letter. Not just a note, but a full letter, front and back of the page covered in her careful script. The date at the top made his stomach drop, written 2 weeks before he'd left for the cabin. Jack, I don't know if I'll ever give you this letter. Probably not. We're past the point where words on paper can fix anything. But I need to write it anyway. Need to say the things I can't seem to say to your face. Jack sank into a chair, the kettle forgotten on the stove. I never wanted the divorce. That probably sounds strange, since I'm the one who filed. But I didn't want it. I wanted you. I wanted the man I married, the one who used to talk to me about his dreams, who'd stay up until midnight just because we were having a good conversation. That man disappeared slowly. So slowly I didn't notice at first. The kids needed things, the business demanded attention, and you gave and gave until there was nothing left for us. For me, I became another item on your to-do list, another responsibility to manage. I should have said something earlier, should have fought harder to reach you. But I was tired too, Jack. Tired of competing with your work, with your phone, with everything that seemed more important than sitting down and just being with me. D'abord, the time I realized how far apart we'd drifted, I didn't know how to get back to you. Every conversation felt like crossing a minefield. So I stopped trying, and you didn't notice, and that told me everything I needed to know. I hope you find what you're looking for in Montana. I hope that cabin gives you peace, or clarity, or whatever it is you need. You're a good man, Jack. You were a good father, even if you can't see it. Preston and Claire love you, even when you frustrate them. I loved you too. Still do, in the way you love someone you've shared 20 years with. But love isn't enough when you're lonely in the same house with someone. Maybe this letter is selfish. Maybe I'm just working through my own regrets. All I know is I'm sorry. Sorry I couldn't reach you. Sorry I gave up. Sorry we couldn't figure out how to be what each other needed. Take care of yourself up there. Christine. Jack read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing layers he'd missed. The kettle started whistling, pulling him back to the present. He turned off the stove with shaking hands, finished preparing Hope's bottle on autopilot. The foal drank eagerly, oblivious to the emotional wreckage in Jack's chest. Dolly watched from her bed, eyes knowing in that way animals sometimes had. She still loved me, Jack said to Dolly. All that time I thought she was just done. She was lonely, missing me while I was right there. He'd been so focused on being a provider, on building security for his family, that he'd forgotten to actually be present in his own life. Christine had watched him disappear, and instead of forcing the issue, she'd quietly grieved the loss of their marriage while they still lived together. Jack pulled out his phone before he could overthink it. Christine answered on the second ring. Jack? Surprise in her voice. Is everything okay? I found your letter, the one you wrote before I left. Silence stretched between them. Then, I didn't know that was in the book. I must have been using it as a bookmark and forgot. I'm sorry, Jack said, for all of it. For checking out, for making you lonely, for not fighting when things got hard. Jack, no, let me say this. You were right about everything in that letter. I did disappear. Got so caught up in providing that I forgot why I was providing in the first place. Thought being a good father, a good husband, meant working harder, earning more. Never realized I was losing you all in the process. Christine's voice was thick when she spoke. We both made mistakes. I should have said something sooner. Should have made you listen instead of just accepting your absence. Would I have listened, really? I don't know, maybe not. They talked for 20 minutes, the conversation halting and painful, but more honest than anything they'd shared in years. Jack told her about Dolly and Hope, surprised by how easily the words came. You sound different, Christine said. More present. I feel different. Being needed like this, it's, I don't know, clarifying. I'm glad. The kids have been worried about you. I know. I'm trying to do better with them, too. He paused. Christine, I don't expect this to change anything between us. I know we're past that. But I needed you to know I heard what you wrote, and I'm sorry it took me this long to understand. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." After they hung up, Jack sat with the letter in his lap, feeling lighter somehow. The marriage was still over, the divorce still real, but the bitterness that had surrounded it felt less corrosive now. They'd both been hurting, both struggling, both too proud or too tired to bridge the gap that had grown between them. Understanding didn't erase the pain, but it made it bearable. Hope finished her bottle and promptly fell asleep against his leg. Jack stroked her fuzzy head, thought about all the ways love could fail, not from lack of feeling, but from lack of attention, from taking someone's presence for granted until they weren't present anymore. Dr. Whitmore arrived mid-afternoon, carrying additional supplies. "How's our patient?" she asked, examining Dolly. "The same, I think. Maybe a little weaker. That's to be expected." She checked Dolly's vitals, adjusted the IV drip. "You're doing everything right, Jack. She's comfortable, and that's what matters now." "It doesn't feel like enough." Dr. Whitmore straightened, studied him with those perceptive eyes. "Death is part of life, especially with animals, especially out here. Best we can do is make sure they don't suffer, and they don't die alone. You're giving her that." She stayed for coffee, sitting at the table while Hope slept in her enclosure. Jack found himself telling her about Christine's letter, about the conversation they'd had. "Sounds like you're starting to sort through some things," Dr. Whitmore said. "Maybe. Feels like I'm just realizing how much I didn't see before. That's called growth." She smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, grief and regret are useless, unless they teach us something. Sounds like you're learning." After she left, Jack spent the evening with Dolly and Hope. He read to them from Christine's book of short stories, his voice filling the cabin. Dolly's breathing had that wet rattle again, deeper than before. "You can rest now," Jack told her softly. "Hope's going to be okay. I promise you that. She'll have a good life, be loved and cared for. You did everything a mother could do." Dolly's eyes held his for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound of such profound weariness that Jack's throat tightened. He stayed beside her through the night, one hand on her neck, feeling the slow beat of her heart beneath his palm. Jack woke to his phone, buzzing insistently on the floor beside him. Dawn light was just beginning to creep through the windows, turning everything soft and grey. He fumbled for the phone, saw Preston's name on the screen. A voicemail. Preston had called while Jack was asleep. He sat up carefully, not wanting to disturb Dolly or Hope, and played the message. "Hey, Dad, it's me." Preston's voice was uncertain, careful in the way it got when he was trying not to say the wrong thing. "Claire told me about the animals you're taking care of. That's really good. I'm glad you have something to focus on." A pause, sounds of movement in the background. "Look, I know things have been weird between us, for a while now, but I was thinking maybe I could drive up there. See ya. Meet these donkeys Claire keeps talking about." Another pause, longer this time. "I've got a week before school starts again. Could come up for a few days if you want, if that's okay." The message ended. Jack stared at the phone, Preston's words echoing in his head. His son wanted to visit. After 2 years of barely speaking, of conversations that never got past surface pleasantries, Preston was offering to drive 8 hours to this remote cabin. Jack's thumb hovered over the callback button, but he couldn't make himself press it. What would he say? The last real conversation they'd had was the fight, Preston announcing he'd turned down the job at Jack's firm to take a teaching position, Jack saying things he'd regretted before the words were even finished. "Teaching?" Jack had said, voice dripping with disappointment. "You have a degree in architecture from one of the best programs in the country, and you want to teach high school? I want to make a difference in kids' lives. You could make a real career, build something, not waste your potential on..." "On what, Dad? On doing something that actually matters to me? Not everything's about building a business empire. I built that empire for you and your sister, so you'd have opportunities, security. I don't want your empire. I want you to respect my choices, to see me as something other than a disappointment." The words had hung between them like smoke. Jack had opened his mouth to take them back, to explain he wasn't disappointed in Preston, but in himself for not understanding his son. But pride had sealed his throat, and Preston had left, and they hadn't spoken beyond brief, stilted phone calls since. Now Preston wanted to visit, to bridge the gap Jack had created. "I don't know what to say to him," Jack told Dolly. "Don't know how to apologize for the things I said." Dolly shifted slightly, her breathing labored. Hope stirred in her enclosure, making the small sounds that meant feeding time. Jack prepared the bottle, moving through the routine that had become second nature. As Hope drank, he thought about Preston at 7 years old, helping Jack build a birdhouse in the garage. The patience Preston had shown even then, the careful way he'd held the nails, his face serious with concentration. Jack had loved those moments, had treasured them even as he'd slowly stopped making time for them. Work had always been waiting, deadlines pressing, clients demanding. The birdhouse had been replaced by late nights at the office, weekends catching up on paperwork. By the time Preston was 15, they barely saw each other. And Jack had told himself it was fine. He was providing, wasn't he? Paying for Preston's education, his car, his future. That was what mattered. Except it wasn't. Preston hadn't needed a benefactor. He'd needed a father. Hope finished eating and immediately tried to climb into Jack's lap, all gangly legs and determination. Jack laughed despite himself, the sound rusty from disuse. The foal was getting stronger every day, her personality emerging, curious, affectionate, fearless in the way of babies who don't know the world can hurt them. "You're going to be a handful," Jack told her, scratching behind her ears the way she liked. His phone rang. Preston's name flashed on the screen. Jack answered before he could overthink it. "Hey, son." "Dad, did you get my message?" "I did, just now." Silence stretched between them, familiar and uncomfortable. "So?" Preston's voice was carefully neutral. "Would it be okay if I came up?" Jack looked at Hope, at Dolly watching from her bed with those patient eyes, at the cabin that had become less a hideout and more a home in the past few days. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Really?" Surprise cracked through Preston's careful tone. "Really, it's not much up here. Just a cabin, no real amenities. But there's space, and the animals, well, you should meet them." They talked logistics. Preston could come up in 3 days, would stay for a few days if that was all right. Jack agreed to all of it, felt something loosen in his chest with every word. After hanging up, he sat with the reality of what he'd just agreed to. Preston was coming. In 3 days, Jack would have to face his son, have to find words for the apology he'd been carrying for 2 years. The thought terrified him. "Your son's visiting," Dr. Whitmore said that afternoon when she came to check on Dolly. Jack had mentioned it while she was examining the donkey. "In 3 days. That's good. Family's important." She adjusted Dolly's medication, her expression troubled. "Jack, I need to prepare you. Dolly's declining faster now. She might not make it to 3 days. Jack had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so plainly still hurt. What do I do? Keep her comfortable. Talk to her. Let her know she's not alone. Dr. Whitmore's voice was gentle. And when it's time, don't try to hold her here. Animals know when it's time to let go. Our job is to give them permission. After she left, Jack spent the evening between Hope and Dolly. The foal was full of energy now, exploring her enclosure, testing boundaries. Dolly watched her baby with eyes that held both pride and sorrow, as if she knew what was coming and was making peace with it. Jack pulled out the photograph again, studied Autumn's young face. The name tag on Dolly's. Halter had an address, faded but still legible. On impulse, Jack opened his laptop, searched for the address. The property had been a small farm outside of Helena, about 40 miles from Jack's cabin. He found records of foreclosure 8 years prior, the family name listed as Cassidy. Further searching led him to an obituary. Harold Cassidy, died 6 years ago, survived by his wife and daughter. More searching, this time through social media. He found her on the 3rd try. Autumn Cassidy, now 21 years old, attending Montana State University. Her profile picture showed a young woman with her father's eyes and her mother's smile, standing beside a horse, studying veterinary medicine, according to her bio. Jack sat back, feeling the pieces click together. Autumn had loved animals enough at 9 to beg someone to keep Dolly safe. Now she was training to care for them professionally. That childhood love had shaped her path. He began typing a message, then stopped. This wasn't something you said through social media. It deserved better. Deserved care. Jack pulled out paper and pen, actual paper, something he hadn't used in months, and began writing. He told Autumn about finding Dolly, about Hope, about the photograph, and the promise he'd made. He wrote about Dolly's courage, her determination to save her baby, even as she died. The letter took him 3 tries to get right. By the time he finished, night had fallen, and Hope was asleep. Dolly's breathing had that rattle again, deeper and more persistent. Jack lay down beside her, one hand on her neck. "Preston's coming," he told her softly. "My son. We haven't spoken properly in 2 years, and I'm terrified I won't know what to say. But I'm going to try. You taught me that, how important it is to try, even when you're scared." Dolly's ear flicked toward his voice. "Thank you," Jack whispered, "for trusting me, for giving me a reason to wake up, for showing me what real courage looks like." He stayed beside her through the night, listening to her breathe, feeling the slow, steady beat of her heart beneath his palm. When dawn came, Dolly was still breathing, still fighting, still holding on for her baby. Jack spent the morning cleaning Dolly's halter, wanting to preserve it for Hope. As he worked the old leather with saddle soap, something shifted beneath his fingers, a thickness that shouldn't be there. He examined the halter more carefully. The leather had been doubled over in one section, stitched closed. Not original construction, but a later modification. Someone had created a hidden pocket. Jack worked at the stitching with careful fingers until it gave way. Inside was another plastic bag, this one sealed more carefully than the first. He opened it slowly, aware he was unwrapping something precious. A second photograph slid out, this one more recent than the first. The same girl, Autumn, but older now, maybe 12 or 13. She stood beside Dolly in front of a small barn, both of them looking directly at the camera. But it was the expression on Autumn's face that caught Jack's attention. Sadness barely concealed behind a brave smile. He turned the photo over. The handwriting was older, more controlled, but still recognizably the same child's. Her name is Dolly. Please keep her safe. Autumn, age 9. But beneath that, in different ink, someone had added more. If you find this, please know, Dolly was loved. She was my best friend when everything else fell apart. When we lost the farm, when Dad got sick, when everything went wrong, Dolly was there. I had to give her up when we moved to town. Mum said we couldn't keep her. I've looked for her for years. If she found you, if she trusted you, please take care of her. She deserves someone who'll love her like I did. Autumn, age 13. Jack's hands trembled. This wasn't just a note from a child who'd had to give up a pet. This was a goodbye from a girl who'd spent years looking for an animal she'd loved and lost. He examined the halter tag again, this time with new understanding. The address was 12 years old, from when Autumn was 9. She'd modified the halter later, added the second note when she was 13. 4 years of holding on to hope that someone would find Dolly and read her words. Jack pulled out his laptop, returned to his earlier searches with new questions. The foreclosure records showed the Cassidy farm had been sold 8 years ago. Harold Cassidy's obituary was from 6 years back. Cancer, according to the brief write-up. The family had scattered after the farm loss. No forwarding address listed. He searched deeper, following digital breadcrumbs. Found a notice about farm animals being rehomed through a local rescue organization 8 years prior. Dolly's name wasn't mentioned, but the timing lined up. Then he found something that made his breath catch, a post on a community forum from 5 years ago. Username, Autumn C21. Looking for information about a donkey named Dolly, approximately 15 years old, last seen in Helena area. Brown coat, white muzzle, very gentle. She was my best friend growing up. If anyone has seen her or knows where she ended up, please contact me. I just want to know she's okay. No responses to the post, just Autumn's lonely plea echoing in digital silence. Jack kept searching, found more posts spanning years. Autumn asking animal rescues, posting in farming communities, searching. Always searching. The most recent post was from 8 months ago. Still looking for my childhood donkey, Dolly. I know it's been a long time, and the chances are slim. But if anyone in Montana has information about a donkey matching this description, I'm studying veterinary medicine now, and could provide care if needed. Just want to know what happened to her. Jack sat back, the full weight of Dolly's journey settling over him. This animal hadn't wandered randomly. She'd been looking too. Not consciously, perhaps, but with the same determination that had driven a young girl to spend years searching for her. And somehow, dying and pregnant and desperate, Dolly had found someone who would care, who would read the notes, understand what they meant, and protect what she'd left behind. Jack looked at Dolly, saw her watching him with those knowing eyes. You weren't just running, he said softly. You were looking for help, but maybe you were looking for her too, for Autumn. The pieces fell together. The address on the halter was 40 miles from Jack's cabin, but in the direction Dolly had been traveling. She'd been heading toward Helena, toward the last place she'd been loved. Pregnant and injured, she'd been trying to find her way home. And when she couldn't make it, when her body gave out, she'd found the next best thing, someone who would finish what she'd started. Jack's vision blurred. The trust Dolly had shown wasn't random or desperate. It was intentional. She'd traveled nearly 40 miles through mountains while dying, had hidden her baby, and then sought help with the same determination that had driven Autumn to search for years. Two creatures looking for each other across time and distance, both refusing to give up. Jack pulled out his phone, found Autumn's social media profile again. This time he didn't hesitate. He sent a direct message. Autumn, My name is Jack Warner. I found Dolly. She came to my cabin 5 days ago, injured and sick. She was pregnant. She led me to her newborn foal hidden in the woods. I've been caring for them both, but I need you to know. Dolly is dying. I'm so sorry. I found your notes in her halter. I found your posts looking for her. She's been loved and cared for these past few days. She's not alone. If you want to see her before, if you want to come, I'll send you the address. Her baby is safe and healthy. I promise you I'll take care of her. But I thought you should know. Thought you deserved to know what your donkey did, how brave she was. She saved her baby. She trusted a stranger to finish what she started. I think maybe she was looking for you. I think she never stopped. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then immediately worried he'd overstepped. What if Autumn didn't want to know? What if opening that old wound was cruel rather than kind? His phone buzzed less than 5 minutes later. Is this real? Please tell me this is real and not some cruel joke. Jack's fingers flew across the keyboard. It's real. I have the photographs you left in her halter. Both of them. And I have your donkey, who fought harder than any creature I've ever seen to save her baby. Send me the address. I'm coming now. She might not make it until you get here. I need you to know that. I don't care. I'm coming. I need to see her. Need to tell her I never stopped looking. Jack sent the address, his heart hammering. Then he went to Dolly, knelt beside her, took her face gently in his hands. She's coming, he told her. Autumn's coming. She never stopped looking for you, girl. Never gave up. Just like you never gave up on your baby. Something shifted in Dolly's eyes. Awareness, recognition, maybe. As if some part of her had been waiting for exactly this news. You hold on, Jack said, his voice breaking. You hold on just a little longer. Let us say goodbye. Dolly's breath came in labored gasps, but she was still there, still fighting. Jack stayed beside her, one hand on her neck, feeling her heartbeat. Steady, determined, still holding on. Jack spent the next hours in a state of controlled chaos. Autumn had texted. She was leaving Bozeman immediately, would arrive in approximately 3 hours. 3 hours to prepare, to make sure Dolly was as comfortable as possible, to figure out what he'd say to a young woman who'd spent years searching for an animal she'd loved and lost. He cleaned the cabin with frantic energy, realized halfway through how absurd that was. Autumn wasn't coming for a social visit, but couldn't stop himself. The activity kept his hands busy, kept his mind from dwelling on Dolly's increasingly labored breathing. Hope needed feeding. Jack prepared the bottle with shaking hands, nearly dropped it twice. The foal drank eagerly, oblivious to the tension crackling through the cabin. When she finished, she curled against Dolly, and Jack's throat tightened at the sight. This might be the last time they lay together like this, mother and daughter, peaceful in the morning light streaming through the windows. Jack pulled out his sketch pad, something he hadn't touched since before the divorce. His hands moved across the paper, almost of their own accord, capturing the scene. The cabin interior, the 2 donkeys, the quality of light. Details he wanted to preserve, to give to Autumn as proof that her friend hadn't died alone or unloved. He was adding shading to Hope's outline when he realized what else he was drawing. Extensions to the cabin. A proper shelter attached to the main structure, with space for multiple animals. A paddock beyond that, fenced and safe. Storage for feed and equipment. Plans. He was making plans. Jack set down the pencil, stared at what he'd drawn. This wasn't just a sketch. It was a commitment. A vision of staying here, of building something permanent, of taking in more rescues, more animals that needed sanctuary. The architecture was sound, the design practical, yet elegant. He'd incorporated the natural slope of the land, positioned everything to maximize sun exposure and wind protection. It was good work. Maybe the best work he'd done in years, because it came from something deeper than professional obligation. It came from purpose. Dr. Whitmore arrived an hour before Autumn was due, took one look at Jack's face, and went straight to work, examining Dolly. "How is she?" Jack asked, though he could see the answer in the vet's expression. "She's holding on through sheer determination. That's all. That's left now. Will." Dr. Whitmore adjusted Dolly's pain medication, checked her vitals with gentle efficiency. "You said the girl's coming?" "Autumn. She should be here soon." "Good. That's good." Dr. Whitmore stood, wiped her hands on a cloth. "Animals know, Jack. They know when someone they love is near. Dolly will hold on for this." "You really believe that?" "I've been a vet for 35 years. I've seen things that don't make scientific sense, but are true anyway." She touched Jack's shoulder. "Dogs that travel hundreds of miles to find their owners. Cats that sense when someone's dying and stay with them. Animals understand love and loyalty in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. If Dolly remembers Autumn, if some part of her has been searching all these years, she'll know when that girl walks through the door." After Dr. Whitmore left, with promises to return later, Jack sat beside Dolly, one hand on her neck. Hope had fallen asleep between them, snoring softly in the way of young things who feel completely safe. "You did something I couldn't," Jack told Dolly quietly. "You kept going when everything fell apart, kept believing someone would help, that your baby could be saved. I gave up. Came here to hide and count down the days until nothing mattered anymore." Dolly's ear flicked toward his voice. "But you wouldn't let me hide. Showed up at my door dying, asked me to be better than I'd been, asked me to show up even when it was hard." Jack's voice cracked. "And now Autumn's coming. That girl who loved you, who never stopped looking. You're going to see her again before—" He couldn't finish the sentence. A sound outside. Tires on gravel, an engine cutting off. Jack's heart lurched. He checked his phone. Autumn had made good time, must have driven faster than she should have. He stood, moved to the window. A small sedan sat in the clearing, and a young woman was climbing out, her movements quick and desperate. She looked exactly like her photographs. Dark hair pulled back, her father's eyes, her mother's determined jaw. She wore jeans and a university sweatshirt, and her face held an expression Jack recognized because he'd worn it himself. Hope and dread tangled together. Jack opened the door before she could knock. They stared at each other for a moment. This stranger who'd driven 3 hours on faith, and the man who'd become the keeper of her childhood. "Autumn? Is she—" Autumn's voice broke. "Is she still alive?" "Yes. Come in." Autumn practically ran into the cabin, then stopped short when she saw Dolly lying on the blankets, Hope curled against her side. Her hand went to her mouth, and the sound she made was pure grief and relief and recognition all at once. "Dolly," she whispered. And Dolly, who hadn't had the strength to lift her head in hours, raised it now. Her ears pricked forward, her eyes focused with sudden clarity, and she made a sound Jack had never heard from her before. A greeting, a call, recognition. Autumn dropped to her knees beside Dolly, hands shaking as she touched her friend's face. "You remember me," she sobbed. "Oh God, you remember me." Dolly nuzzled against Autumn's hands, made that sound again. Softer now, contented. The effort cost her visibly, but she didn't stop, kept touching Autumn with her muzzle, kept looking at her with eyes that held everything words couldn't express. Jack stepped back, giving them space. He watched Autumn curl herself around Dolly, watched her whisper things meant only for the donkey's ears, watched Dolly relax in a way she hadn't since arriving at the cabin, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Hope woke up, made a curious sound at the stranger. Autumn looked at the foal and started crying harder. Her baby, she managed. This is her baby. Her name's Hope, Jack said quietly. Born 5 days ago. Dolly hid her in the woods, then came to find me. She traveled nearly 40 miles while dying, pregnant and injured, to save her. Autumn pressed her face against Dolly's neck, her shoulders shaking. You were always so brave, always so strong. I'm sorry I couldn't find you. I'm sorry it took so long. They stayed like that, Autumn and Dolly, reconnected after years apart. Jack made coffee he didn't drink, fed Hope when she demanded it, gave them time he knew was precious and finite. Eventually, Autumn looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you for taking care of her, for finding me. She did all the work, Jack said. She's the one who kept going, who trusted a stranger, who made sure her baby would survive. I just showed up. That's more than most people would do. They talked as the afternoon faded into evening. Autumn told him about losing the farm, about her father's illness, about having to give Dolly up when they moved to an apartment in town, about years of searching, of never quite letting go. Jack told her about finding Dolly, about the photograph and the notes, about Dolly leading him to hope, about his own brokenness, and how 2 animals had given him a reason to stay. Night fell. Dr. Whitmore returned, examined Dolly one last time. She met Jack's eyes and shook her head slightly. Soon. The 4 of them sat together in the warm cabin, Jack, Autumn, Hope, and Dolly, waiting for what came next. Dawn found them still awake, Jack and Autumn keeping vigil on either side of Dolly. Hope had finally settled, exhausted from trying to stay alert through the night. She slept with her head across Dolly's shoulder, a position of trust and comfort. Dolly's breathing had grown more shallow through the night, each breath a visible effort. But she seemed peaceful, more so than she'd been since arriving at Jack's door. Autumn's hand rested on her neck, and Dolly would occasionally turn her head to nuzzle the young woman's arm, as if reassuring herself this reunion wasn't a dream. She used to sleep outside my bedroom window, Autumn said quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. We had her in the paddock by the house. I'd wake up every morning, and she'd be right there, waiting for me to come out. Jack listened, grateful for the stories. They gave shape to Dolly's life before, filled in the blank spaces. When Dad got sick, when everything started falling apart, Dolly was the constant, the one thing that stayed the same. Autumn's fingers traced patterns in Dolly's fur. Mum tried to explain why we couldn't keep her. The apartment didn't allow animals. We couldn't afford boarding, all the logical reasons. But I was 13 and angry, and I blamed her anyway. You were a kid dealing with impossible circumstances. I spent years thinking Dolly must hate me, must think I abandoned her. Autumn wiped her eyes. And then she's here, dying, and she still remembered me, still trusted me. Animals forgive easier than people, Jack said, maybe because they live so completely in the present. The past doesn't trap them the way it traps us. They fell into silence, watching Dolly breathe. The sun climbed higher, turning the cabin golden. Hope woke and demanded feeding, breaking the heavy quiet with her insistent bleating. Jack prepared the bottle while Autumn watched, a small smile crossing her face, despite everything. She's beautiful. Looks just like Dolly did as a baby. You knew Dolly as a foal? My grandparents owned her. She was born on their farm. When they passed, Dolly came to us. I was 7. Autumn accepted the bottle, and Hope took to her immediately, drinking with her usual enthusiasm. I grew up with her. She taught me everything I know about patience, about gentleness, about loving something outside yourself. Is that why you're studying veterinary medicine? Partly. I wanted to save animals the way I couldn't save Dolly from being given away. Wanted to understand how to help when everything seemed hopeless. She looked down at Hope. Guess Dolly's still teaching me. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted them. Jack checked his phone. No messages, no calls. He wasn't expecting anyone. He moved to the window and felt his heart stutter. Preston's truck sat in the clearing, and his son was climbing out, looking uncertain and determined in equal measure. "Someone you know?" Autumn asked. "My son. He wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow." Jack's hands felt suddenly clumsy. I should go talk to him." He stepped onto the porch, closing the door gently behind him. Preston stood by his truck, a duffel bag over one shoulder, something held carefully in his other hand. When he saw Jack, he raised the object slightly. A baseball glove, old leather, shaped by years of use. "I left a day early," Preston said. "Hope that's okay." Jack couldn't speak for a moment. His son stood there, 28 years old, holding a glove that represented everything they'd lost. The weekends playing catch in the backyard, the easy conversations between tosses, the connection that had existed before Jack had gotten too busy, too focused on providing to just be present. "It's more than okay," Jack managed. They met halfway across the clearing, the space between them closing after 2 years of distance. Up close, Jack could see the uncertainty in Preston's eyes, the hope warring with old hurt. "I found this at Mum's place," Preston said, holding up the glove. "Remember, it was Grandpa's. You gave it to me when I was 7. "I remember." Jack's voice was rough. "We used to play catch every Saturday morning. Until we didn't." The words hung between them, not quite an accusation, but close. Jack had stopped making time, had let work consume the hours that had belonged to his son. One missed Saturday had become 2, then a month, then a pattern neither of them knew how to break. "I'm sorry," Jack said, "for all of it, for saying your career choice was a waste, for not seeing you, really seeing you, for so long, for making you feel like you had to be what I wanted instead of who you were." Preston's eyes went shiny. "I didn't choose teaching to spite you. I know," Claire explained. "You wanted to be present for your students the way I wasn't present for you." "That's not—" Preston stopped, swallowed hard. "That's exactly it. But I didn't mean it as an insult to you. I just wanted to matter to people in a real way. Wanted to show up for them. You do matter. And you are showing up. That's worth more than any building I ever designed." Jack gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. Meet the animals. Meet Autumn. Then maybe we can talk more?" Preston nodded, followed Jack into the cabin. His eyes went immediately to Dolly, then to Autumn sitting beside her, then to Hope, investigating everything with a foal's boundless curiosity. "This is Autumn," Jack said. "She's the one who loved Dolly first, when Dolly was young. And this," he scooped up Hope as she tried to chew Preston's shoelace, "is Hope. The reason I've been up for 5 days straight." Preston reached out tentatively, let Hope sniff his hand. The foal immediately tried to eat his fingers, and Preston laughed, a sound so unguarded and genuine that Jack's chest ached. "She's incredible," Preston said. "They both are." Autumn smiled tiredly. You must be the son Claire mentioned. She said you were coming later. Couldn't wait. Preston glanced at Jack. Needed to see my dad. The simple honesty of it broke something in Jack. He set Hope down, turned to his son. I've been a lousy father, not just these past 2 years, but before that. Got so caught up in building a business, in providing, that I forgot the point was to be there for you and your sister. To know you, not just support you financially. Dad, let me finish. Jack took a breath. You're a teacher. You shape young lives, help them find their way. That's not a waste. That's the most important work there is. I'm proud of you, Preston. Should have said it 2 years ago. Should have said it every day of your life. But I'm saying it now, and I mean it. Preston's face crumpled. He set the glove down carefully, then pulled Jack into a hug, the first real embrace they'd shared in years. Jack held his son and felt the last of his walls crumble. I missed you, Preston said against his shoulder. I missed you too. Every day. They sat together as the morning stretched into afternoon. Jack, Preston, and Autumn, forming a circle around Dolly, while Hope explored the cabin with increasing confidence. The conversation flowed easier than Jack had expected, the presence of the animals somehow smoothing the rough edges that might have existed between strangers and estranged family. Preston told them about his teaching, about the students who struggled, and the small victories that made the long hours worthwhile. A kid who'd been failing English, but wrote a poem that made Preston cry. A girl who'd never spoken in class, finding her voice through a project on social justice. You're doing what matters, Jack said, and meant it completely. Autumn shared stories about Dolly, the time she'd escaped her paddock to eat all the apples from the neighbour's tree, the way she'd bray at exactly 6 every evening, demanding dinner, how gentle she'd been with Autumn when the girl's father died, somehow understanding grief in the way animals sometimes did. She was my best friend, Autumn said softly, the one who never judged, never left, never stopped being exactly who she was. Preston asked about Hope, how Jack had found her, what caring for a newborn foal entailed. Jack explained the every 2-hour feedings, the constant vigilance, the way Hope had pulled him from his isolation, whether he'd wanted it or not. Sounds like you've been doing important work too, Preston said, meeting Jack's eyes. Showing up, being present. That's what matters. The words landed like absolution. Jack nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Around noon, Dolly's breathing changed, became more laboured, more irregular. They all felt it, the shift in the cabin's atmosphere. Dr. Whitmore had warned this would happen, had said it could be minutes or hours, but that when it came, it would be unmistakable. Autumn pressed closer to Dolly, whispering words meant only for her friend's ears. Preston reached out, placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, a gesture of support, of solidarity. Jack thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. His failed marriage, his retreat to the mountains, his giving up on connection and purpose. Dolly arriving at his door, dying but determined. Hope hidden in the woods, waiting for salvation. Autumn's years of searching. Preston's courage in reaching out despite the hurt between them. All of it converging in this small cabin, in this moment of loss that was somehow also a moment of profound grace. I need to tell you something, Jack said to Preston. About the cabin, about my plans. Preston looked at him questioningly. Jack stood, retrieved his sketch pad from the table. He showed them the drawing, the cabin with its additions, the animal shelter, the paddock, the vision he'd created without quite realizing he was committing to it. I'm staying, Jack said. Not just for now, but permanently. I'm going to build this, a sanctuary for rescue animals. Give them a safe place, the way Dolly gave me a reason to be safe. Autumn's eyes widened as she studied the sketch. This is beautiful. Professional quality. I was an architect before I gave up on everything. Jack looked at Preston. I know it's not what you or Claire probably hoped for, your dad becoming some hermit animal rescuer in the mountains. Are you kidding? Preston's voice was thick with emotion. Dad, this is the first time I've seen you excited about anything in years. The first time you've talked about the future like it matters. It does matter. They matter. Jack gestured at Hope, at Dolly. I can't bring back the years I wasted. Can't undo the mistakes I made with you and your sister. But I can do this. Give animals like Dolly a place to be safe, to be loved. And maybe you could help? During your summer breaks? Preston smiled, and it transformed his face. I'd like that. Teaching's my calling, but this, yeah, I could help build something like this. We could build it together. The phrase hung in the air between them, weighted with more than construction plans. Building something together, rebuilding what they'd lost, creating something new from the ruins of what had been. Jack pulled the carved bird from his pocket, the one he'd been working on the night Dolly arrived. He'd finished it this morning while waiting for dawn, had smoothed the last rough edges until it was perfect. I want you to have this, Jack said, offering it to Preston, for your classroom, to remember that even broken things can finish what they start. Preston took the carving carefully, turned it over in his hands. The bird's wings were spread in flight, every feather detailed, the wood grain flowing through it like life itself. It's incredible, Dad. It's a promise that I'm going to finish what I started, being your father, being present, being someone you can count on. Preston set the bird down carefully, then hugged Jack again, harder this time, longer. Thank you, he whispered. They separated, both wiping their eyes, and found Autumn watching them with a bittersweet smile. You're lucky, she said, to have each other, to get a second chance. You'll have chances too, Jack said, with Hope. She's Dolly's legacy, her second chance. And I meant what I said. This sanctuary, when it's built, will always have a place for her. I'm still in school, can't take care of her full time, but you can visit, can be part of her life, can teach her the way Dolly taught you. Jack moved to where Hope had curled up for a nap, stroked her soft fur. She's going to need someone who understands where she came from. Someone who loved her mother. Autumn nodded, tears streaming freely now. I'd like that. And maybe, after I graduate, I could help with the sanctuary, provide veterinary care. I'd be honored. The afternoon light shifted, grew golden and thick. Dolly's breathing had slowed even more, each inhale a battle she was losing. But her eyes were clear, moving between Autumn, Hope, and Jack with something that looked like peace. She knows, Autumn said softly. She knows Hope will be okay, that we'll all take care of her. Jack knelt beside Dolly one last time, placed his hand on her neck the way he had so many times over the past 5 days. Thank you, he told her, for choosing my door, for trusting me, for teaching me how to show up again. Dolly's eyes found his, held them for a long moment. Then she turned her head to Autumn, nuzzled against the young woman's hands one final time. I love you, Autumn whispered. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking. Dolly sighed, a sound of such complete contentment that everyone in the cabin felt it in their bones. Her eyes drifted closed, her breathing slowed further. And as the sun set over the Montana mountains, surrounded by the people who loved her and the baby she'd saved. Dolly let go. 2 months had passed since Dolly died in the cabin, surrounded by love and the certainty that her baby would be safe. Jack stood on his porch now in the crisp October air, watching Hope graze in the newly built paddock. She'd grown substantially, her legs less gangly, her confidence expanding daily. The paddock fence gleamed with fresh paint, solid and secure, built by Jack and Preston, working side by side over a long weekend. The cabin had changed too. The additions from Jack's sketch were taking shape, a proper shelter attached to the main structure, framed and roofed, waiting for walls. Preston would return at Thanksgiving to help finish it. Claire had visited twice already, bringing supplies and her physical therapist's eye for making the space accessible and functional. Jack's daughter had cried when she first saw Hope, had spent an entire afternoon sitting in the paddock while the foal investigated her with fearless curiosity. "She's why you sound different on the phone," Claire had said. "Why you actually answer when I call now." It was true. Jack answered his phone now, checked messages, stayed connected in ways he'd abandoned during his months of isolation. The difference was that connection no longer felt like obligation. It felt like lifeline. His relationship with Christine had settled into something neither of them had expected. Friendship, genuine and uncomplicated by the weight of their failed marriage. They spoke weekly, conversations that ranged from small details to deeper reflections on what they'd both learned. She'd driven up once to meet Hope, had stood in the paddock with tears in her eyes. "This suits you," she'd said, "more than Seattle ever did." She was right. The mountain cabin, the animals, the slower pace. It all fit in ways Jack's previous life never had. He'd been chasing something he thought he wanted, building an empire because that's what success looked like, never stopping to ask if it made him happy. Now he woke each morning to Hope's demanding bleats, spent his days working with his hands, planning the sanctuary that was slowly becoming real. He'd adopted 2 more animals, a horse with a bad leg that a rancher was going to put down, and a sheep that had been abandoned by a petting zoo. The shelter would house them through the winter, keep them safe and warm. Dr. Whitmore stopped by weekly, had become something more than just a veterinarian. A friend, maybe more eventually, though neither of them was rushing toward definitions. She'd lost her husband 5 years ago, understood grief and the slow process of rebuilding. They took things as they came, shared coffee and conversation, let whatever was developing between them unfold naturally. Today she was due any minute, coming to check on the new arrivals and bring supplies. Jack had coffee ready, the cabin warm and welcoming in ways it had never been during his months of isolation. Hope trotted over to the fence as a car pulled up the drive. Not Dr. Whitmore's truck, but a vehicle Jack recognized. Autumn climbed out, bundled in a winter coat, her face bright with the kind of joy that came from seeing something you loved. "There's my girl," she called to Hope, who immediately began showing off, prancing and kicking up her heels. Autumn visited every few weeks, driving from Bozeman between classes and study sessions. She'd helped name the horse, Steadfast, for his determination to heal despite the injury, and had been there when the sheep arrived, diagnosing a minor infection and teaching Jack how to treat it. "How's school?" Jack asked, as she joined him at the fence. "Exhausting, rewarding. I had to suture a dog yesterday, supervised, obviously, and I only cried a little bit after because it went so well." Jack smiled. Dolly would be proud. "I think about her every day," Autumn said softly. "But it doesn't hurt the way it used to. Now it feels more like she's still teaching me, through Hope, through all of this." They watched Hope play for a while, the foal's joy infectious and uncomplicated. Then Autumn pulled an envelope from her pocket. "This came yesterday. Thought you'd want to see it." Jack opened it carefully. Inside was a letter on official university letterhead and a photograph. The letter was brief, an acknowledgement of Autumn's application for advanced study, a mention of her essay about the donkey who'd taught her everything about perseverance and love. The photograph showed Autumn in a white coat, standing in what looked like a veterinary clinic, holding the carved bird Jack had given Preston. "Preston sent it to me," Autumn explained. "Said you made it, and he thought I should have it for my clinic someday. For luck." Jack's throat tightened. Preston had given away something precious, had seen where it would mean the most. That kind of generosity, that kind of seeing beyond yourself, that was the man Jack's son had become. No thanks to Jack, but despite him. "He's a good man," Jack said. "You both are." They talked while Hope grazed, comparing stories about school and sanctuary plans and the small moments that made life worth living. When Dr. Whitmore arrived, the three of them walked the property together, checking on the animals, discussing what would be needed before winter truly set in. "You're building something special here," Dr. Whitmore said. "A place where broken things come to heal." "Broken animals," Jack corrected. "I wasn't just talking about the animals." That evening, after Autumn and Dr. Whitmore had left, Jack sat on his porch with Hope sleeping in her shelter nearby. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo Preston had sent earlier, the carved bird sitting on his classroom desk, surrounded by student art projects and books. "The kids love it," Preston had texted. "Keep asking about the man who made it. Told them my dad's the strongest person I know because he learned how to ask for help." Jack saved the message, added it to the collection he'd started keeping, evidence of his life now, of connections maintained and nurtured, of showing up, even imperfectly. He thought about Dolly, about the dying animal who'd refused to give up, who'd travelled 40 miles while pregnant and injured, because giving up wasn't an option when someone you loved depended on you. She'd taught him that, had collapsed at his door and demanded he be better than he'd been. The mountain stretched out before him, dark against the darkening sky. Winter would come soon, would test the shelter he'd built, would require long hours of work and dedication. But Jack was ready for it, had purpose now, reason to push through the hard days. His phone buzzed, Claire sending a photo of herself at the airport with luggage. "Surprise! Got a few days off? Can I visit?" Jack smiled, typed back immediately. "The door's always open." And it was. The cabin that had been his hiding place had become a home, a sanctuary not just for broken animals, but for broken people learning how to heal. His children were welcome here. Christine was welcome. Dr. Whitmore, Autumn, anyone who needed a place to rest and remember what mattered. Hope stirred in her shelter, made the small, contented sounds of a creature who knew she was safe and loved. Jack watched her through the window, this legacy of Dolly's courage and sacrifice. "Thank you," he said quietly, words meant for a donkey who'd saved them both. "For not letting me disappear, for showing me how to come back." The carved bird sat on his windowsill now. Preston had insisted Jack keep the original, had asked him to make another for the classroom. Morning light would stream through it tomorrow, illuminating the careful detail, the spread wings, the creature frozen, in the moment of flight. Jack would wake to feed Hope, would work on the shelter, would answer when his children called, would build something that mattered, one day at a time, one animal at a time, one moment of showing up after another. He'd come to the mountain to disappear. A dying donkey had refused to let him, and in saving her baby, in finishing what Dolly had started, Jack had saved himself. The mountains stood eternal around him, witnessing. The cabin glowed warm with lamplight. Hope slept safe and sound, dreaming whatever dreams donkeys dreamed. And Jack Warner, architect turned animal rescuer, broken man made whole by unexpected grace, smiled into the gathering dark and knew he was exactly where he belonged.